Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast, where each episode brings you compelling conversations and stories designed to entertain, enlighten, and encourage. And now here's your host, Brian Sexton.
Welcome, everybody, to the Intentional Encourager podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sexton. Thank you for joining me today. So excited to have the ability to talk to a guy that I admire in the LinkedIn universe. You can go to LinkedIn and find him there. You can also go to his website, davidmasover.com. And David is a B2B specialist. In fact, he's got a new podcast coming out called Driving B2B Sales Revenue. He'll tell us a little bit about that, some things going on in his life. But I want to welcome you and introduce you to a friend of mine. If you don't know him, a great guy, David Masover, joins me today on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Maybe if I could say that correctly, David, we could get off to a good start. How are you today?
Baby steps, man. Baby steps. That's all we're asking for.
I know, right?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me here, man. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, you know, it's funny. I mean, I've done radio and done radio interviews now for 17, 18 years, and I'm stepping into this podcast thing. So you would think I would know how to bring on a guest, and I have totally stumbled and fumbled today bringing you on. But through the power of the interwebs, you and I are connecting today. You are in Budapest, Hungary. So I've got to ask you, how does a West Coast boy like yourself get all the way to Budapest, Hungary and set up residence there?
Well, there's kind of a short, a medium, and a long version of the story. The short one goes something like this. So there was this girl. Now, the long version requires a lot of alcohol and tissues and a whole lot more time than we have, so I'm not sure how much more you want to know.
Well, again, it's, a lot of people in this day and age are kind of afraid to make those moves unless they're going to a vacation home or something like that. But to transplant yourself over there to Hungary and to do business, you've got a very unusual way of doing business and running your company. So you work when a lot of people in your now home country are enjoying their evening time and their downtime. How has that been transitioning for you, going from working in the States on the different time zones in the United States to being across the pond and working again when everybody else is enjoying life?
Well, yeah, right now it's like that, but it wasn't always like that. I moved over here in 2004. And when I first moved here, I was doing business here. I was doing business in Hungary and also in some other countries around the region, and Poland and Czech Republic. And, it was just kind of normal. I would work the same time that most other people worked. It was in 2017. And, when I first came here, I was mostly working as a sales consultant and a sales trainer, just like I'm doing right now. But between about 2009 and 2017, I did a whole bunch of different stuff. I was doing startup stuff. There was a big startup movement here. I did some interim management projects. And in 2017, one of those ended. And I just, kind of took a time out and said, all right, what do I really want to do? And I thought, number one, I really want to go back to sales consulting and training because it's just what I love. It's what I've done with most of my life. It's my passion. I think I maybe got 10 more years I want to work, and I really want to focus there because that's just what I enjoy. But I also realized that, I've been blogging since 2009 when my first book came out. I started blogging and I looked at my analytics, and like almost everybody that comes to my blog is in America. And I thought, well, listen, if my message is resonating there, why don't I try and not limit myself geographically? So I started posting on LinkedIn to generate prospects. And it just happened that a lot of people were connecting with me on LinkedIn from the States, and I wound up doing business on the States. So yeah, I work very, very funny hours, and I do wind up working kind of 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. my time. But there's times during the day when I don't work, which allows me to be a more involved father and a husband that contributes a lot to the household. So it's kind of a modular work schedule, but it works. And I get to do what I love, at all different times of the day, even though it's different stuff.
You talk about messaging and how your message resonated with your core audience, which was Americans. How different is sales messaging in Europe as opposed to sales messaging in the United States?
Yeah, that's a pretty huge question. I'm not sure I'm the guy to answer that, even though I'm over here. When I came here in 2004, I kind of came with a hypothesis, and that hypothesis was I'll bet there's some things about sales that are the same, and I'll bet there are some things about sales that are different, and it's going to be interesting to find out what's what. And lucky for me, most of my work kind of operates on a very kind of a foundation, fundamental level. What I found is that when sales organizations are having trouble, it's usually not the stuff up at the surface that's giving them trouble. It's not the specific industry. It's not the specific culture. It's kind of that more basic and fundamental. So what I do tends to resonate across cultures, and I was able to have some success here too. I think the cultural stuff, Europe is too big. It's like saying, how does sales culture in America differ from something else? And, New York is different than South Carolina, is different than Florida, is
Hmm.
different than California. And, Europe is even more of that because you got all these different countries and cultures and histories and religions. And so, you can make some generalizations. They'd probably be mostly bad.
Hmm.
And I'm just probably not the guy to do it. So that's that. I don't know what else to say about
Well,
that.
no, and it's interesting because now, in the last 20 years with the explosion of the internet and the technology boom, we've never seen anything like that. It's so easy nowadays to take a giant world and make it incredibly small. When you're talking to your customers and you're doing a lot of your virtual meetings, what's one thing that you keep in mind as far as connecting with that customer? How do you make that experience more personal for that customer to feel like they're sitting in the same room with you and literally you're thousands of miles away?
Yeah, that's a great question. And they always said that Bill Clinton and other people as well, but Bill Clinton is the guy that comes to mind. Was someone who you were having a conversation with him, you felt like you were the only person. And I think that there's a couple of things that feed into that. One of them is just really paying attention and really being interested. And another, I think, and this applies to sales in general, where I think a lot of salespeople kind of have trouble, is you really have to know your craft. You really have to know your business. You really have to know who you are as an individual. You really have to be able to be present. And I think that when you're really present with yourself and you're really present with somebody else and you're really interested in what's going on, it's not the same as being there in person, but there's still a connection that happens. At least that's what I've found.
And thinking about connection, David, how important what premium do you put a value on connection? Because I've often said a lot of times the biggest ability that humans have today is to connect, but people are constantly trying to refine and learn about connection. When you think about connection, what do you think of what immediately comes to mind? If you had one word to kind of make a synonym to connection, what is that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the word that gets tossed around a lot is relationship. I'm a sales guy, and so from the professional angle, you hear a lot about relationships. Sales is built on relationships. You buy from people you know, like, and trust, that kind of thing. And this is going to sound weird, but I always kind of resisted that idea. I never liked the idea that as a salesperson, I was going to lead with the relationship. I
Hmm.
thought my job was to serve, my job is to help, my job is to understand somebody's situation. And if it seemed like there was a match, then it was my job to kind of bridge the gap between their situation and what I'm selling and how it might work for them. And what I've found is that when you do that really authentically, and when you do that in a way that it really provides value, not just in the way that people toss the around, but you really help the person with the situation. Sometimes you wind up having a relationship with that person. And that's fantastic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's you meet them or not, and sometimes even when you do business, you form a relationship. But me, that always kind of came second. I think the people who lead with, I'm a relationship guy and I'm going to try and make a relationship with somebody, and then from that relationship, I'm going to try and sell them something, that always felt more disingenuous to me. It always felt more right and legitimate and real and authentic to say, hey, man, I'm here in my capacity as a sales professional. And as people, we might wind up liking each other. I think that order of attack is actually pretty important, and I think get that wrong.
All right, hang on a second, David. David, I loved what you said there a minute ago about connection and relationship and things like that, because I think connection and relationship is everything. It's huge because so many social media companies are wanting to connect with their customers and things like that. And they use connection in a way that we don't think about connection. It's more of a bombardment, or, hey, let me get as many messages as I can out here to my customers to try to get them to take action one time to do something. In sales, in your 20 years of sales, what's the single biggest thing that you've seen change in how messaging is delivered and how salespeople are taught to sell?
So three things. Number one, I've been in sales for 30 years. So, God bless you for thinking I look so young. But
well, I wanted to throw 20 years out there because of the changing of the millennium. Yeah, you're welcome. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
But no, and I said the last 20 years because, again, we've gone into a new millennium. We've crossed over from the 1990s
Yep.
into the 2000s.
That's true.
And things like that. So that's why I wanted to use that time frame reference. But again, the
Yep.
question, I want to go back and ask the question again. What to you has changed in the last 20 years in selling, as far as what you can
Yep.
see? Kind of put your crystal ball and your hat on there to kind of take us through that
Yep.
question.
Well, so you asked two questions, and I think it's interesting because they're different. They seem similar, but they're different. The first question was, what's changed?
Mm-hmm.
And at a lot of levels, nothing. At a lot of levels, nothing. I mean, sales has always been, sales done properly has always been about helping a customer solve a problem with whatever it is that you sell. When you do it right, that's what you ought to be doing.
Yep.
I think what has changed is the patience. I mean, when I started selling, for example, it used to be, I got started selling cold calling. And I kind of had the feeling that if you sounded confident and calm and had a good tone and had a good reason for calling, people would give you a little bit of time to kind of get through, the next 30 seconds before they hung up on you or decided to continue with. And, obviously, there was a whole spectrum there. Some people were really good. Some people were really bad. Some people would hang up on you no matter what happened. So, but it feels to me like, fast forward to today, and your time in order to have somebody make that decision has been compressed. It's just, it happens sooner. When I teach people now, I tell them, listen, you have 5 to 10 seconds before somebody decides. They may or may not take action on that decision, but they're going to decide. And that's not very much time. And so I think, the basic fundamentals, man, it's all the same.
Well, David,
but you have to be that much more crisp when you execute.
Let me jump in there, because what I'm thinking about is our swipe society today, right? We scroll through our feeds, we scroll through our mentions, and literally, to your point, you're making a 5 to 10 second decision based on what you scroll through, whether or not you're going to stay on that person's message, whatever it is that they are talking about, whether it's what they ate for dinner last night, or to your point about a sales messaging. I think what you said there is brilliant.
Well, what's really funny is, I was around when the whole computer thing was evolving. And back then, you young kids are going to think this is really funny. But back then, all this technology was supposed to make life slower and easier. We were all supposed to be sitting back with our feet up, sipping our umbrella drinks while the robots and the artificial intelligence and the automated stuff and the flying cars and the jetpacks just took care of everything. But it seems like it's had completely the opposite effect. We're all scrambling. We're attached to work a lot longer in our day. And we're all feeling this pressure to just make decisions quickly and not really go deep into something before deciding what we have to do. I'm not making a judgment about it. Maybe it's better that way. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But I think that's definitely a change that we're all experiencing.
David, do you think that that makes a customer's decision-making process a little bit faster? They feel like they have to get to a decision a little bit quicker because, again, people are just, information is coming at people so fast. And again, they're making that swipe decision like we talked about it a minute ago. Do you find buyers taking their time, or do you think maybe there's that internal pressure to go, hey, I need to make a decision here pretty quickly because if not, something else is going to come along?
Now, sales is a pretty broad category. And I think that if you were talking to somebody who was B2C or online, they might
Yeah.
give a different answer. I'm B2B. Most of my sales have, most of my sales and the clients I work with, they have sales processes that are complex enough that there's going to have to be some discussion
Yeah.
about what happens. And I think that in that environment, actually the opposite happens because the customers now, I mean, this is a generalization, but I think there's some truth to it. Customers now have so many choices and they all look so similar. I think it actually slows them down because there's always this idea, well, what if there's another option? And what if I haven't looked at all the
Yeah.
things? And what if something else is a better fit? So it puts more pressure on the salesperson to really make that connection and really make sure that the problem solution fit is clearly articulated and understood on both sides of the table. Otherwise, you risk no decision, which I think is the biggest objection and the biggest competitor that any of us are facing these days.
Well, it's analysis by paralysis, it's or vice versa. It's paralysis by analysis because people can look on Google or whatever, they can, Bing, whatever the search engine is, and type in a UPC code about a product or something, or read a review online about a particular service that you might be selling. And artificially, they've kind of told themselves, okay, well, maybe I need to move forward in the buying process. Or maybe they say, well, the information that I'm seeing is that I should pull back. How do you feel that sales will progress in the next 5 years? Now I'm going to ask you to really put your crystal ball hat on. Do you think artificial intelligence is going to help salespeople or hurt salespeople?
Yes.
Both. Well, yeah. And listen, I say that as an old sales guy myself, because I see things in the inner workings. To your point about the way business was done, the salesperson was the main information source, the main message driver, the main technical, if you sold a technical product, that customer came to you for those technical informations. Now you make a sales presentation and the customer has half the information you've already got in your PowerPoint presentation. They've already kind of pre-done that research already.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. Number one, I think one of the advantages that salespeople still have over customers with respect to that is that customers are always going to have to be generalists. A salesperson gets the opportunity, if they take the opportunity, to really become an expert on their solution, really become an expert on their space. And while a customer, I think, in most cases, again, generalization, but can go out and get a lot of information, a good salesperson is going to be able to get into a conversation about what's going on and draw from their experience helping companies that have had similar problems, multiple times, bring insights and bring perspectives and bring ideas that the customer may not have had from, however much research they did, when this project was in front of them. So I think, again, it puts the pressure on salespeople to be excellent. And if you are excellent, and if you are present, and if you are communicating and listening, then you overcome this perception that people have that they have information. And, the Challenger sale talked about it, and some other people talk about it as well. But when you can really help the customer to understand that, you've got some insights to offer, then they become more comfortable buying from you because they feel like you've helped them to make a better decision about what they're working on than they could have by themselves. And when that's the nature of the relationship, it's really a win-win. And I think that's what professional sales ought to be.
Mm-hmm. Talking to author, trainer, knowledgeable guy on sales, and the host of the upcoming podcast, Driving B2B Sales Revenue, David Masover. I'm your host, Brian Sexton, here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. David, I want to talk a little bit about and ask you this and kind of take the conversation in a little different direction. But what is the biggest obstacle, either personally or professionally, that you've overcome? And what did you do to get through that obstacle?
Well, I would have to say on the personal side that it was a Taekwondo match long time ago that I lost in dramatic fashion.
Okay.
I was only bloodied up a little bit. The guy who came after me and fought the same competitor, he was knocked unconscious. And this is weekend warrior stuff. We weren't in the Olympics. This was just like we're putting on our pajamas after work kind of stuff.
You guys were doing MMA before MMA was cool, huh?
Oh, no. This was strictly just kind of, very amateur stuff. But, it was fun, and we took it seriously, and we had a good teacher, and we went to tournaments. And stepping into the ring at the next tournament took more guts than I thought I could muster. It was really something for me to do that. And the fact that I did, because I really got hurt. I wasn't, go to the hospital hurt, but it scared me how, so quickly I could, he knocked me in the nose. He didn't break it, but it was, all bloody. It was a mess, and I saw what could have happened, and it just freaked me out. And you go back to class, and it's your friends, and you spar hard, but not, you don't try to hurt each other. You go to a tournament, it's like the Karate Kid, right? You don't know how aggressive the other teacher is and how aggressive they're teaching. And you step into the ring and it's like, gosh, something could happen. So it really took a lot of guts to do that. And I didn't win, but, getting into the ring was a big victory for me. And something I've carried with me for the 20 years since it happened.
Do you feel like that getting back into the ring mentality has helped you to persevere in sales? How were you able to translate that life lesson into a professional lesson?
I don't think of it that way because I'd already been in sales for quite some time. And if I'm reflecting on it now as an older gentleman, I think that there was a lot of opportunities growing up to face those kind of challenges. I was in the Boy Scouts, for example, and every month we used to go on these backpacking trips. And I can tell you, it always looks real romantic when you're out there with your tent. You got the picture with your tent and your sleeping bag. But man, when you're hiking up that hill with that heavy pack, when you're tired. Yeah. And you can't stop till you get there. I mean, you can stop and rest, but you're not really going to stop until you get to camp. And sometimes you're miserable, and sometimes you're cold, and sometimes it rains. And it's like, what? You just got to keep putting that one foot in front of the other. So from a very young age, I kind of had this lesson that there's just kind of no way out but through. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't give up on a miserable situation. But you know what? Sometimes you got to tough it out. And I think that those kind of early lessons served me well in sales and served me well in situations like the Taekwondo, and, served me well through personal situations that, probably won't get into on this podcast. But, at some level, a lot of that stuff is the same. It's just about having this idea that, if I hang in there, I have faith that I'm going to be able to muscle through. And I'm not exactly sure where that came from, but for sales and a bunch of other stuff, I'm awfully glad that's become a part of who I am. It's an asset.
Do you think perseverance is something that we lack today in our world? Because I know I'm in my late 40s. I see a lot of Gen Xers and Gen Zers that we talk about first world problems. I dropped my cell phone or this won't load up for me or something like that. And you want to look at them and go, man, grow up a little bit, because the things in life that you may face that are way tougher than your cell phone's too slow, or I got to have an iPhone 11, is bigger than that. What do you think that perseverance taught you as an overall lesson in life?
Wow, that's a good question. I, I I don't know that I don't know that I can articulate it very well, but I know that wherever you are in life, it's easy to feel like what you're facing is a challenge. And as you go on in life, at least as I've gone on in life, you face bigger challenges, and some of them are downright scary. And you face instances in your life that are scarier than you think. And I've had a pretty calm life
Hmm.
compared to an awful lot of people around the world. But I think just knowing, kind of starting with little things and building up, just knowing that, hey, man, I can get through this. I've gotten through things in the past, and just because it's hard and just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean that I'm not going to be able to muscle through. That
Hmm.
doesn't mean you don't fall apart afterwards or whatever, but
Yeah.
you get through.
Well, and here in the States, as you well know, and the time we're recording this podcast, there in a lot of states is a shelter in place. There a lot of people are being told not to go out or self quarantine. Work from home has become the big thing, and people are going to have to learn perseverance. What do you think the biggest takeaway is going to be when this COVID-19 thing is done? And it will pass. It normally does. I want to ask the question, though, in two parts. I want you to speak directly to sales, something you know extremely well, and then speak to how you think people will overcome in life, going through this COVID-19 situation.
Well, on the sales side, I'll tell you what I hope happens. Um, I think that sales has kind of gone off the rails in the last 5 or 10 years, if we're talking about it in general.
Yeah.
And I think there's been a whole lot of kind of robo sales, sales by attrition. Let's not focus on the quality. Let's just focus on the attrition. If we want to sell more stuff, let's make more dials, as opposed to let's work on conversion ratios. And now at this point in time, a couple of weeks into when everybody's really feeling this coronavirus situation, people are starting to talk about things that many of us have been talking about for a long time, which is,
Yeah.
don't reach out to people unless you can help them and solve a problem. So it is my hope that after all of this is done, some of that lesson is going to remain. I don't know how optimistic I am, but I'm certainly hopeful that core truth that just always should be at the forefront of selling is going to stick.
Hmm.
People are talking about it now, and it's a good message, and I really hope it does.
David, I want to ask you something. What is your why? Every day when you get up, people have whys. Maybe it's their personal
Mhm.
mission statement. Mine is to add value to everything that I touch or impact personally and professionally. What is your why? What's maybe your mission statement that drives you every day, and your purpose for helping people get better in what they do?
So there's a short answer and a medium answer, and I'll give you both this time. The short answer is that when I started at sales, I was terrible. I was absolutely terrible. The medium answer is I got thrown into a sales job like a lot of people do, even today, which is kind of, here's your desk, here's your phone, here's the list from the person who, just left the company. Good luck. That was it.
Yep.
I've never had a sales job before, got no training. I'm sitting there in an open office, listening to the people on my left and my right, having these just fun conversations, telling jokes and laughing. And then at the end, they're writing up orders. And I'm sitting there thinking, how do you do that? And it was a really, really bad feeling. I did not know what to do. And I was full commission. And I was
Yeah.
too stubborn to quit. And I stuck with it. And so the way I tell the story now, it's true. I figured out sales. Sales to me was just this thing that was too big. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what sales is, but I can break it down. I can think about what am I selling and who needs to buy it and what problem does it solve and why should they buy it from me and where can I find them and what can I say to get into a conversation, and once I'm in a conversation, what can I do to continue that conversation. And so the way I tell the story is I invented the sales process. I mean, I found out later that somebody else had already invented the sales process, but I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah.
And that has driven literally all of my success in sales. That mentality, that approach as a manager, as a consultant, as an executive, as an author. And now, 30 years later, when my work is really helping salespeople, sales leaders, sales organizations improve, I don't forget that feeling staring at that phone. And I don't forget that feeling when I was put into a sales manager job, not being trained and not knowing what to do.
Yeah.
And it feels bad. And obviously this is something I do as a living and I like to make money and it's good to be able to buy nice things, but to be able to help people to figure out how to be effective at this work that we do is a very big motivator for me. And that is my why.
And it's interesting. I have a similar sales background. The first time I took a territory, I was working for a large food service distributor. I took a mature territory and I had a veteran rep that pulled me aside, David, and he called me Sexy. And he said, Sexy, let me give you some advice. It's going to take you 3 years to figure it out, to know your customer base inside and out, to know what they want to buy, to know how they want to buy, to know what's important to them. And most of all, just to get to know them, get to know their families, get to know what gets them up in the mornings. And he was spot on, David, because it took me 3 years to figure my territory out and to figure out what value I could bring to the process. Because to your point, we don't know what we don't know. And we're just, we've got to, where I live in West Virginia, the Appalachian people, they'll lick their finger and stick it in the air and kind of see which way the wind's blowing. And that's how they try to determine. The old farmers would do that. They would determine how to plant the crops and things like that. Well, we're in a world now where we have all these different pieces of technology, but it still comes back to what you figured out for you was, I got to make the process personal. Because I can't take your process and make it personal to me unless I get it ingrained here and then get it ingrained in my heart. When you finally figured out you had that V8 moment and the light switch went off, how transformational was it for you? What kind of success did you start seeing and how quickly did you start seeing it?
I don't know that there was a moment. One of the things that always kind of gave me trouble was cold calling. And, my parents are both scientists and I had recently graduated from college and I'm like, there's got to be a book. And I got a book and I read the book and I did what the book said and I got good at cold calling. And it was something that I really had a lot of anxiety about. And when I became effective at cold calling, it wasn't like I read the book and I was good at it, but I read the book and I knew what to do, so I was confident. So I did more of it and I did it consistently and I started getting results and there was this virtuous cycle. Then I got results and so then I went full cycle with people and was starting to get more sales and getting more confident, being more confident on the phone. And so I think that was really kind of a linchpin skill that helped to propel me. But sales has a lot of moving parts and they're all interrelated. So I think the takeaway for anyone who really wants to get better is try to find something that you can work on that's really going to move the needle and work on that. And then find something else later to work on and then find something else. And it never stops because the world keeps changing and you keep changing. But just getting that piece down and knowing that I could get that piece down, I think were the things that really changed the way I felt about it. I can do this. I can get better. I can work at it. I can find solutions. I can improve. I can be successful increasingly. That's very empowering.
Well, and David, I think what you hit on there is consistency. You found something that worked for you and you used it consistently to get a repeatable delivery. It's like a guy that's a golfer or a lady that's a golfer. Once they find the swing, they just repeat it over and over and over again through repetition and practice. And so, man, that's a great message to segue into my last question. And I appreciate your time today. What's one piece of intentional encouragement that you would leave with this audience to kind of help lift them and get them? Because there may be somebody that listens to you and go, man, David, your story and my story are real similar. What's your best piece of intentional encouragement for this audience?
Well, full disclosure, you warned me that you were going to ask that question. And,
I did.
It's
the Intentional Encourager podcast. I want to leave folks with some intentional encouragement. Otherwise, it would be the BS and then there's a whole different monicum you could take those two letters, the BS.
Yeah, I'm gonna be on that. I'm gonna be on that podcast next week, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No BS.
So there's a book that I read. I picked it up out of my bookshelf. It's inscribed to me from my mother back in 1981. Wow. It's called Illusions. It's by the guy that wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull, Richard Bach. And there's a sentence that he wrote in there that really resonated with me back in 1981. 1981, I was, 16 years old. And the sentence goes something like this. I'm looking at the book. I don't remember it. I had to go pick it up. But the sentence says, "Live never to be ashamed if anything you do or say is published around the world, even if what is published is not true." And that really struck me because I think, we can be so sensitive about what other people say about us or things like that. But, when you live your life in a way that people know who you are and they know what your intention is and they know what you're all about, and they hear something about you that doesn't sync up with that, and the impression that you have with them is stronger than what they heard. Obviously, it doesn't work that way all the time, but when it does work that way, you've really connected with that person who, when given the choice about, am I going to believe this thing that I heard, or am I going to believe what I know about this person? When they defer to what they feel they know about that person, living your life such that people can feel that way about you, I think is a goal to shoot for and a way to live that was impressed upon me when I was 16, and a whole lot of years later, that's certainly something I strive for today.
Wow. That's exactly right. You want to be authentic and genuine and consistent. And man, what a perfect way to wrap up the podcast. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Tell folks how they can get connected with you and get connected with your resources and, just get more of what you have to offer, David.
Well, I'm very active on LinkedIn. Very easy to find me there. David Masover, Masover, and that's also the name of my website, davidmasover.com. Reach out, love to connect with you, and see where it goes from there.
Yep, and tell if you're not connected with David and you hear about him on the Intentional Encourager podcast, let him know that you heard about him on the Intentional Encourager podcast. David, my friend, I appreciate your time, man. You have dropped some great knowledge on the audience today. And man, I am so grateful for your time. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Brian.
My thanks as always to producer Bryce Sexton and technical advisor Matt Means. And the ultimate thanks goes to the Lord Jesus Christ, who provides intentional encouragement every day through his word. And until next time, remember, everyone, everywhere, at any time, and any place can be an intentional